Okay, hi everyone. Well, welcome to this morning's Facebook Live. I guess we're stepping into midday though, so good evening, good afternoon, or whenever you're watching this. So with great pleasure today, I'm talking about something that I think it's spoken about increasingly within the spiritual community, but in a quite a new and revolutionary way. So today's topic from this concept of how do we become free of suffering, as we look at many different areas of life, and I guess people who I really respect and honor and love in the work that they do in various areas of life in respect to becoming more free of suffering, in other words, becoming happier, more peaceful. So today's talk is on sex, pleasure, intimacy, spirituality, all these kind of things really. I guess to start with, I'll just briefly explain my own path over the last 25 years with this, having studied certain Taoist practices, more for those who are familiar with the name, the Mantak Chia approach to sexual energy cultivation, which can be done as a solo practice or as a couple. And also, I guess, more recently exploring the idea that I believe that spirituality is every moment of life. In other words, I think it's useful that when we begin our journey to separate it into, okay, I just go to church or mosque or temple one evening, one day a week. So that gets you started, gets you a flavor of it. Or I go to my yoga class, or I do yoga for half an hour in the morning, and that's the spiritual bit of my day done. And then I just get on with my life. But of course, really the depth of spirituality is much more than that. It's the invitation to turn your life into practice. Everything we do, from walking to eating, and of course, as we will be discussing today, we could say making love or sexual intimacy becomes a part of our practice. So over the years, I guess I've experimented with this, and where I'm up to in my own path now is that really, just like everything in life, intimacy is a form of meditation. And then you have different schools of meditation. You have Kundalini meditation, which is about playing with energy and raising energy. And then you have more devotional practices. Then you have practices which are simply being mindful in the moment. And of course, being a kind of a Zen Taoist practitioner, the predominant practice is to be compassionate and available to the moment, which I guess is where my, if you like, my sexual practices have led me. And to be transparent today, the person who I'm very happy to share this space with and to share this conversation with is also my partner. So we have a mutual understanding of these types of practices. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Sarah Rose Bright, who is a sex, pleasure, and intimacy coach. And really, I'm going to ask you, Sarah, at the beginning of this interview, the greatest philosophical questions of all time. Who are you and what do you do? So if you'd like to maybe share some of your story or just introduce yourself, and let's enter this conversation.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here with you upstairs, you downstairs in this conversation.
Is that a euphemism?
And yeah, no, really happy to have this conversation and loving what you're doing of the framing of the end of suffering and the conversations that you've had so far. So delighted that you've asked me to join you to talk about sex, intimacy, pleasure, spirituality, and all these wonderful things today. So who am I and what I do is a huge big question and depends on which moment you ask me. But in the context of our conversation today, I have been journeying with sexuality for nearly 20 years now, and working in this field for over 10 years. And I got into this field because of my own suffering. And I was suffering a lot, very unhappy with, or terrified of sex, actually. Didn't like my body, actually didn't like who I was, didn't know I even had, well, not only couldn't I communicate needs, I didn't even know what my needs were. but didn't understand why I was having such challenges with this area of my life. And I started to do some sort of stepping out into that sort of personal development field, because I knew something had to shift and my suffering was immense. I was on my own with it, felt there was something wrong with me, that I was the problem, and it must be all my fault. Didn't have anybody I could talk to about it. And as I started to go to some little workshops and things, just noticing that people were talking about spirituality, they were talking about health and well-being, they were even talking about relationships, purpose, all of these things, but sex was just not mentioned whatsoever. And then this knowing in me that that was the most painful place of all, and it's the place I needed to go to, and not knowing where to go. And I knew I didn't want to go to a doctor, because I knew there wasn't anything medically up with me. I didn't feel like going to a therapist. That just didn't feel somehow, just didn't feel the right modality. I didn't even know much about therapy, but I knew it wasn't where I wanted to be. I think I was in my 20s then. I thought therapy was something for sort of older people or something like that. And I was in Waterstones and I started just exploring books, and I just found some just different books. Then I found a book on Tantra and sexual spirituality. And that sort of opened a journey up to booking myself on a workshop, even though I was like utterly terrified, because I knew this is where I had to go. And really looking back on it, I was in my 20s. I was a really young single mum who really didn't even know how to look after myself much at that point. And I'm actually quite amazed that I managed to find my way to that workshop. And I just had this spark within me that I actually did have a moment before my 30th birthday where I was just like, if this is it for sex and relationships for the rest of my life, like, take me now. I cannot do this. And that was a bit of a catalyst of, actually, I really have to do something about this. And so I think it was that sort of deep spark of spirit somewhere in me that just said, just go, just find somewhere, just keep going, even though the rest of me was just like, no, this is too much. And that workshop just blasted me open, because I found a group of people who were talking about sex and spirituality, and who were doing practices, and who were just having open conversations, and even doing quite full on exercises that just sort of made me look at this whole world in a different way. And I literally skipped out of this workshop feeling like I'd found, a route through this now. And then, here I am today, 20 years later, still exploring, still learning.
Beautiful. It intrigues me, sex is a minefield. And from a male perspective also, it's like, I guess for a lot of our training in my generation was basically watching pornography so that had been copied 20 times on a videotape when we were about 14 and 15. It was either that, or in schools, it was like the mechanics of sex, which was sex education. It was like more of a biology class and didn't really bring much about connection, intimacy, those kind of things. So it's no wonder there's a whole generation of people that are a bit confused, and I'm guessing that might be a perpetuated thing now, that maybe in this generation with more access to those kind of things, especially online. One thing that intrigues me is you noticed at the beginning of your journey, I can't remember the words you used, but there seemed to be some kind of either shame or confusion around your experience of sexuality in your body. Where do you, because I can identify, a lot of that came through, my really bad sex education. Where do you think this shame or this misunderstanding came from for you?
So I think it comes from multiple places. And so a big part for me was trauma. And I had a very emotional, abusive relationship when I was a teenager for 4 years. And because it was emotionally abusive, and I had a couple of incidents as well, but because it was emotionally abusive, I I actually thought the abuse was because I deserved it and there was something up with me. And for example, he would name call my genitals and just make really derogatory remarks and all sorts of things. But I didn't have any way to process that at the time, and I thought it was my fault. So I didn't even really appreciate, even till this decade of my 40s, how much of an impact that trauma had on my development. When my sexuality was just starting to flower, then all of this came in and shut me down, and I just was numbing out. And also, you know, this has led to a lot of addictions, drug problems, alcohol misuse, everything. You know, that unraveling of my sexuality over many years wasn't always an easy journey. It's been very difficult and painful, and but also amazing and joyful and exciting as well. So trauma was a big part of it for me. Education, lack of education was a massive part, because, you know, I think most sex education, it's not even that you get the mechanical rudiments of sex, it's just all actually very fear-based of how not to get pregnant, catch STIs. It's like all the things not to do, rather than, you know, what's possible about pleasure and consent and communication. And I think, you know, not just the education piece was lacking, which is a phenomenal hole in people's lives. You know, it's like there's, you know, what taught at school around sex is so unhelpful, and yet it's such a fundamental part of so many people's lives. And then also, for example, in my family, you know, when sex was mentioned, there was discomfort. So just the picking up on what's not said. You know, so for example, when I first discovered masturbation, I don't even remember how I discovered it, but being confused that something felt really good, but something felt wrong about it. Like I knew I couldn't sort of speak to my family about it and ask about it. So you're internalizing that shame continually. And then if you do go and then all other things can happen. For me, I didn't have a lot of confidence after that relationship. I was very much brought up to be very much the good girl in the family. That was my family of origin. And so how that leads to not really connecting to your needs or being able to ask for them. And then also what you see in society, you know, for me, I saw bits of porn, or I saw people who I perceived as really sexy and didn't feel like them. So was telling myself that I was different and maybe this wasn't for me, or I wasn't good enough, I didn't look good enough, I didn't have the right body, or I didn't know what to do. So there's just heaps of things that build this sort of soup up of confusion and shame. And other things happened, like I had fantasies that I thought were disgusting, that I would have these fantasies. So again, something must be wrong with me that I'm thinking these things. So just these layers of shame build up, and then, you know, not having anybody to talk to or share with them with. So when I went into my early relationships, I was already had this built up inside of me, and was very unable to communicate anything. And so, and you know, those layers that I've spoken about are so common across the board, and there's many more as well. So there's sort of some of the key things. And then having experiences where you are asked what you like and you don't know what you want, or you have sex when you're not really wanting it, but you say yes to please the other person, and you just have all these experiences that build on the shame, build on the confusion, build on the sense of getting it wrong, something up with me, and just gets bigger and bigger.
That's really interesting. And I guess I imagine that a lot of people will hear that story and connect with that those kind of things within themselves as well. It's really interesting, because usually when I'm doing these talks, I'm comfortable, I'm laid back, but even as we're talking, I feel a level of tension in my central nervous system, because this isn't not something that I talk about that regularly. And I also recognize unconscious levels of shame and discomfort, you know, even within my own being, about like I'd be fine talk about food, talk about exercise, talk about a whole manner of things, and I'd be relaxed and in flow. So I also recognize that there is this kind of really strange collective shame and guilt around sex and sexuality. And what I also notice is the shadow that collectively creates in society, where, you know, there's huge amounts of exploitation, huge amounts of shame, I would say, mate, you know, I'm not a relation expert, so it'd be really good to get your reflection on this, but it seems that issues around sex can be a real breakdown in the intimacy in relationships and affairs, and, you know, or dishonesty. And so it seems such a massive part of our society, of ourselves as individuals, that we really struggle to look at. I'm wondering, where do you think that shame comes from? Is it a religious thing? Is it a cultural thing? Have you seen that within your work?
Oh, it's huge. You see it absolutely all the time. And, you know, and just to sort of what you shared then around, you know, we have phenomenal amounts of rape, abuse, at the extreme. And then we just have whole other layers where this comes out in unhealthy ways, and it comes out in this distorted way because we're not raised to have, for it to be in health. Most people don't have a healthy blueprint in their being of what it's like to be a healthy sexual individual. And so it comes out in all of these different ways. And those layers of shame from just run so deep. And so, you know, sometimes it comes up in sessions where clients just talking about it, the shame just actually just disappears, because I've worked with people, so many people, where they've never spoken to anybody about sex as in the way that they do in our sessions. And, you know, most people who I work with are so scared of even talking about it at the beginning, but they quickly find that, wow, it's okay to talk about it. And actually it's okay. Everything I'm sharing, Sarah's heard a million times before. And so, but then there's some deeper shame that can be in the system, which takes time to unravel and unearth. And it's not just about sex. You know, people can feel shame for all sorts of different things in their life. Shame's just quite pervasive in our society. I mean, you think about some of the words that I certainly heard as a child, you know, shame on you, you should be ashamed for doing that. You know, just even those expressions can sort of infuse our being with a sense of shame. And also guilt is a big one that you mentioned. And, you know, especially when people have been brought up in more religious households and families. And so it's that sort of, someone said the three most common STIs: shame, guilt, and fear. And I think that's such a brilliant way of looking at it. And as you know, like, we both love the work of David Hawkins. They're two of the most heavy emotions that we can experience. And so also, you know, I love the phrase that shame can't exist when the light comes on it. And look, the sun's just come out as I shared that. And as we talk about shame and we create space for that, you know, like I say, it can just start to naturally leave our being as we can find a different relationship with it, not one that's of suppression and hiding.
I'd really be interested in sharing. I know a lot of your work specifically is with women and couples now, but just, I know that you have a history of working with men as well. And I'd be really interested to know what some of the common, just for any guys who are listening, you know, what are the common things that guys tend to come to you with? And then how do you, what's the process of starting to heal some of those traumas and guilts and shames? Just kind of go in general, is that possible?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think across the board for all genders, you know, just the courage to actually say that this area of my life isn't working in the way that I imagine it could, or I sense it could. And so people, it's not uncommon that people come to see me when they've had either a relationship's broken down because of this, or it's got the potential for breaking down because of this, or they've been single for a while and know they need to address this area, or they've got a sexual challenge. So for example, it might be for something like erection problems. I don't use the word erectile dysfunction because it's a very medical term, and it implies a dysfunction, implies something is broken, and that language is really not empowering for people to use. So, you know, people have problems and challenges with erections, as we do with lots of things. So that can be one area. There's very sort of common sort of standard sexual concerns, ejaculating sooner than you would like to. And just to say around that, that's something that the person defines, you know, because for somebody that might be a concern at 2 seconds when they ejaculate, or for somebody else it might be a concern at 20 minutes. So again, it's self-defined. Not being able to ejaculate. What else? I'm just going to move the curtains,
I see
actually,
the
just
sun
because
dazzling you.
it does. Yeah, and it's just getting right in my eyes.
Yeah,
so
sure, no problem.
that's better.
Is that better?
Yeah. So for, you know, for women, not having an orgasm, or body image can be across the board. And then for couples, or a really common one is not
just
feeling.
On that, Sarah, like, just so I can recall, so I would really love to move on to women and couples, but
yeah,
just looking at solutions.
Yes.
So you've mentioned a few things that are very present. I say as a guy as well, you know, longevity. You know, oh my God, you know, I watch these films where generally the guys are on all kinds of medication to keep them going, in most cases, etc. So part of it is longevity. So let's say an example. If someone comes to you and talks about their longevity during sex, you know, I can only manage 5 seconds, or I can't even manage to start before I lose control in a way. What methods do you have, or if someone is listening to this now, because I think a lot of guys would be like, right, I need to hear this. Is there a general approach? How would you approach someone that said they had, did you say that you use premature ejaculation, or? No,
I tend to not. So people sort of use phrases more like early ejaculation, because premature sort of has more of a judgment to it. Yeah. Like it's premature before it should be, whereas early is a sort of softer word, and it's self-defined in terms of how much. So first of all, also just to say, a really common one is just people lacking in sexual confidence. And, you know, that's a common issue. And so, you know, and that can also be part of the picture. So if somebody comes along around, excuse the pun, around early ejaculation, so first of all, it's asking lots and lots and lots of questions, because I could have 10 men present with that issue, but there could be 10 different, there'll be multiple flavors and textures to what's happening. So for example, where's it happening? Is it just with a partner or a lover versus on your own, or is it happening when you're on your own and self-pleasuring? How long has it been happening? When did it start? And looking at the pattern of that, because there can be, for example, patterns like it might have happened and then the person was maybe it was something that happened and then it was unspoken about, so that can help to build the shame around it, for example, because people didn't know what to do in that situation. And so there's lots and lots of questions. And, you know, for example, a lot of people that I've worked with over the years with that as an issue are people that are very busy and move very fast, and everything often can be maybe sex can be quite sort of mechanical or functional. So there can be all sorts of reasons and things why. And for me, it's very important for me to find solutions that are natural and sustainable, because there's so many creams and powders and all sorts of things that you can buy for all of this. I mean, even for example, on the NHS website, it sort of says, think about the football result, to take you out of the situation, to try and last longer. Now, to me, that's just not a solution whatsoever, because you're not able to be in the pleasure with that. So a lot of this is how we learn to do sex is a big part of it. I mean, for some people, they can be ejaculating sooner than they'd like because there might be underlying relationship issues, for example. Could be other things, could be stress, can be a massive thing around this. But for me, the solutions are very often found in the behaviors in the body when it comes to this, because how we learn to do sex and how people learn to masturbate is often quickly and quietly with a lot of shame. And then those are the foundational patterns they take into their adult sex life. And how we learn to do sex in terms of sort of sex getting hotter and faster and all of these things. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, if that's the only way sex happens, a lot of tension in the body. So a lot of people I've worked with this have a lot of tension in their buttocks, in their jaws and different things. So a lot of this is about looking about how they successfully do it quickly, because they're doing it very well, and then shining a spotlight on the behaviors, patterns, thoughts as well that are coming in. So for example, it might be, oh, I just know it's going to happen again. So there's already an expectation, which can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then a lot of the work for me is in the practices of becoming aware of what's happening in the body. How's the breathing? Is the body tense or relaxed? Are you able to be present to what's happening in the body? Because when a man is ejaculating quickly, they can just be going from 0 to 10 and they've got no awareness of what's happening in the middle part. So how do we learn to hang out a little bit more in the middle and build the capacity for that? So there's a lot of unlearning. And this is where working with people professionally around this could be really helpful, because I've worked with so many men who have, and I still do work with some men now who contact me. So many men have tried so many different things off the internet and advice and different things, but often they're putting what might be good habits on top of the habits that are already not working. And so just working through those elements can be really powerful to unpick what's in the way of that. And
yeah, just to further to that, Sarah, I'd say from what you're saying that there's two words that really stand out in meditation, in well-being, and I think in sexuality as well. It's like there's the idea of disease or dis-ease. And we could say we have diseases of the emotions, disease of lack of ease in the mind, emotions, and body. And I found that with my own practices, one of the major things seems to be the capacity, as you're describing, to be very mindful of sensation in the body, of energy, of tension in the central nervous system, and the ability to be able to soften and relax and open again. And it's very interesting how the way you're describing it is, it's almost like shame and tension and the rush to get to a goal, as opposed to enjoying the dance itself, is a big part of that kind of work in your experience, and I guess mine as well.
Totally. And the work I sort of call the model of sexuality that I teach, I call intimate sexuality, because so much sex isn't intimate. It's very functional, and it's very about just heading towards the goal and all of these different things. And that level of intimacy, not necessarily with another person, it might be the intimacy with yourself, like what's happening in my body, what's happening in my being, what am I feeling, what am I sensing, and building up those capacities, which we're not often cultivated in our culture. And it is very much the practices that we learn in yoga or qigong or meditation. And I've worked with so many people who have come to see me about a sexual challenge and have their own spiritual practice or yoga practice, but have never linked how what they do on the yoga mat or whatever can benefit their sex life. And you can suddenly just see this light bulb go on and go, oh, so if I pay attention to my breath and my sexual experiences, what might happen? Because often when people get sexually aroused, they learn to breathe faster and shallow, more faster and more shallowly. So and then there's that increases the tension in the body, for example. So just by learning to bring awareness to all of these different things, that alone can transform the level of experience they have, and also the intimacy within that experience too.
Beautiful. So I cut you off as you were about to start speaking about both women and couples within that experience. So again, I guess the question, whichever way you want to go with this, is for any women listening or any couples, what are some of the standard things that present themselves, and then how you found what recommendation or like start of the journey could you impart today for people?
So I work with a lot of women around not feeling any sexual desire or low desire, and men. It's across the board of all genders. These issues happen in varying different ways, and lack of sexual confidence is a big one, and not being able to, not having had experienced an orgasm, not knowing what you want, not knowing how to ask for it, not being able to communicate, not feeling able to communicate. So there's a whole range of different issues. For couples, it could be they're not having intimacy. It may be they have different levels of desire. So one partner feels they have a higher level of desire than the other, which is going to happen. For me, it's about normalizing that, because that's true for pretty much everybody. They'll always have a different level. And there's plenty that can be done around that. And also just sort of, sex for a lot of people just gets boring. A lot of people come to me because they just say sex has got boring, functional, mechanical, and we don't know what to do. We feel stuck in a rut. And so, that's just a few things. There can be so much more than that. And also just the sense there has to be, or there must be more to this. What else am I missing? What else is out there? And so I feel wherever you are with your any sexual challenges you have, whether it's sexual challenges that through to just not maybe a bit of discontent or whatever in that area of your life, there's a whole spectrum. I think first of all is just like anything, to get some support with this, to learn about it. And that might look like approaching a professional like myself to have a chat about some one-to-one work that might help. And often with this, the first step is the hardest step, because also people can feel so vulnerable about this area of their life, and just the shame or feeling of failure because it's not flowing for them, or they're not content with it. And so just saying, actually admitting that and braving it, that might be sometimes what I do with couples. It's, one person saying, I'm just not fulfilled with this. But the fear can be so big, because their fear can be, how is that going to upset our relationship, our lovely life together? But actually that also can be the catalyst for change. So it might be approaching a professional. But there's also a whole suite of other options. There's more and more podcasts around this. In fact, I'm starting launching a podcast in April around a lot of this stuff. Tons of podcasts, there's loads of books. When I first started doing this 20 years ago, there was absolutely so little available. And especially like the last 5 years, there's been a massive swell of everything across the world around this. And, just look at Sex, Love and Goop on Netflix, which has just been whatever you think about the goop, well, because no, people have different opinions. That series has done brilliant things to put out a different way of looking at sex and intimacy, and showing what's possible in different ways. So there's things like Sex, Love and Goop I'd recommend watching. There's many books. There's now lots of workshops and online courses. If you don't feel, some people feel they want to do an online course before they work with somebody like me or go to a workshop. Some people come and work with someone like me before they then go to a workshop. There's different levels. Some people just listen to podcasts and will get all they need. There's no wrong or right, but I say there's such a range out there for people to explore. And it's good to get recommendations, because especially when you're working with practitioners and going to workshops and different things, because just like everything, there's great people out there, and there's also not so great. So I really invite people to do their research, what is it that they're looking for? What is it that they need? Have some conversations, and just saw that coming at the drive. Have some conversations, and you know, trust your intuition. You know, if you feel somebody doesn't feel right for whatever reason, trust that. If somebody asks you to do something that you're not comfortable with, that's not okay. So, you know, so really to, and like I say, recommendations can be great, but you might actually not be comfortable asking for a recommendation. I'm always happy if people reach out. Please reach out. I'm always happy to refer people if that's helpful.
I think on the couples thing, there's something that really stands out for me that you were talking about is communication seems to be the big thing. I think that seems to be, if I was to choose the ultimate technique for sexual healing and intimacy, both in relationship and general life, it's to be able to really communicate openly about what we like, what we don't like, and I think that it's kind of like relationships. As I said at the beginning, for me, relationships are like a yoga practice, and really the essence of a spiritual practice is at the heart of your being, your what we could call the Buddha nature, the soul, this pure, loving presence. And then what stops us experiencing that is, in the yoga system, they call it samskaras, which is guilt and shame and heavy pains in the body, you know. And so we could really, the idea of spiritual practice is it's twofold: to recognize the beautiful being that we already are, and then to heal the barriers we hold against the experience of that. And I think I think in relationship, where I often use the, as you know, I often use the phrase relationship yoga, because I believe a relationship, relating, is a type of yoga, which is just the same as relating with yourself, where you're starting to look at your samskaras, your barriers to the love that exists within you. And you know that actually people walk into relationships thinking, I'm going to heal, this is going to solve all my problems, but actually the relationship is going to probably bring all your problems up, and then it's how you deal with that. I'm aware that someone keeps on knocking.
There's a neighbor.
Oh, okay. Neighbor. Oh, that's fine. I'll get that later. so I'll go here. So I think so what am I saying? I think it's so someone is knocking. Could I just hand over to you and to maybe talk about how you work through some of those relationships?
Okay, go for it. In fact, I'm just going to hang on for a second and wait for Graham to come back.
No problem. Yes. Oh, please help yourself. Yeah, please help yourself. No problem at all. Thank you.
So we're talking about relationships and communication. Did you have, what was the question? I've lost my thread now as well.
Okay, no problem. So what we were talking about is that when we enter a relationship,
okay, yes, yeah,
it gives us the opportunity to, I suppose, at the deepest level, it's a type of spiritual practice. And I think there's almost like nothing that I can think of that makes you as vulnerable and open within a relationship as that sexual communion, because you're literally laid bare. And you know, so I think it's really useful to understand that as you say, it's not that we have this idea that we're meant to be perfect at sex or perfect at communication or perfect at relationship, and that's how it's meant to start, instead of the understanding that, as Lao Tzu says, the gentle stream is the most powerful thing on earth, because water is the softest substance and rock is the hardest, yet there's nothing better in his day than water for cutting through the hardest substance, which is rock, because of its gentle persistence. So I think, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that for anyone listening, that a relationship, and even at the sexual level of a relationship, isn't about starting off perfect. In itself, it's a healing journey, and in
100%.
itself, it's the very thing that is going to bring insecurities up and confusion and all these things, so that they can be worked through. And I guess what I've found in my own practice is communication, mindfulness, self-compassion, and compassion for the other are some of those most potent tools at dealing when all that stuff comes up, you know. So I suppose you've already spoken about couples and relating quite a lot. It'd be really interesting as well to hear about, for any women who are listening to this. So what are some of the, if there was a top 2 or 3 standard issues that women come to see you about, what do those tend to be, and then how do you work through those as they appear?
Well, can I come back to relationships? Because you've mentioned
please.
a lot there, actually, that I think is really important. And I think I would sort of substitute the word of being perfect in relationships and perfect sexually. That's can be part of the picture. But I think the underlying sort of myth around that is that it should all be natural. And then if it's not natural and effortless, then there must be something wrong. And actually, relationships, you know, and also we're sold this big Disney myth that, you know, there's going to be all these fireworks and relationships going to be amazing and all of this. But actually, in my experience, and, you know, it happened with us, is like when we got together, actually all your fears and everything can come up. And we worked so, you know, it wasn't comfortable the first year, but we just worked so beautifully and sifted through them all. And to build up a foundation of real trust and love and safety and connection and communication and all these sort of things. So I think there's so much healing that can happen in the relationship when we actually, you know, I often use a metaphor for both, you know, sex and relationships as like the relationship garden, or the sexual garden, the erotic garden. That it takes time to cultivate a beautiful garden, or it takes time to cultivate an amazing meal. And that's what we wanted to cultivate: an amazing relationship, amazing sex life. So that means being really open and honest and vulnerable. It means being willing to fully show up. You know, I just hide myself in past relationships and not share my fears, not share my worries, not share my vulnerabilities and all of these sort of things. And then also really make the effort and show up to really, you know, I feel for all of this, one of the biggest medicines that we can have is curiosity, to bring heaps of curiosity into the space. Why am I feeling like this? And also in relating, and, you know, I think this is true of relating across all our relationships, whether it's our friends, our parents, our neighbors, whatever it is to just be really curious and to show up with, who is this person in this moment, you know, and not building up a picture of who we think they are, or making assumptions that because they were like that yesterday, or they enjoyed that the day before, that's what they're going to always do. And if we bring that openness to really, you know, I love, there was a couple who had been together like, oh God, you know, decades. And the woman said, he still surprises me. And he still is a mystery to me. So as well as all the things that we know and we get familiar with each other, actually, this person is still unfolding each and every day, is still a mystery to be in the Tao with each other, which creates a whole different landscape than for the relationship. Then often what happens in relationships, people become really familiar with each other and get really comfy with each other, but then they also get into routines. And, you know, for some people, they love routines and things. There's not anything wrong with that. But that's often when a lot of people, the spark disappears, the connection disappears, and they shut down, one or more shuts down with each other. So I feel like the analogy of relationship yoga we talk about a lot because it is a yoga practice of that showing up, doing the work and being present, being open, and you know, just seeing it as a practice. And you know, our friend Rita says, you know, to be at the feet of your beloved is like the biggest challenging, most you know, healing journey you can go on. So it's about doing that work, but doing it with joy and curiosity.
I think it's the mind. See, you see it. I love the Zen approach, which is that Zen, the main Zen practice in Japanese, not Chinese Zen, but specifically Japanese Zen, it's called Zazen. And their whole spiritual practice is sit in front of a wall and look at it for maybe a week, eventually. And so then, you know, it couldn't be more boring. But then you start to realize after a while that, this isn't boring at all. It's my rejection of this moment, which is boring. It's the story I'm putting onto this, the constant grasping of my mind for something new and bigger and faster and better. And that's the part that is creating boredom here. But actually, when I let go of that, I can be completely present to the isness. And within that freedom of the stories I'm projecting onto this wall and myself in relation to this, suddenly there's a vastness. Suddenly there's, and I think it's the same with intimacy or anything, you know. And that's why a lot of mindful or Zen practice is doing very simple things in a repetitive manner until you can free yourself of the story that you're putting onto it or the rejection of it. And I think this is one of the most beautiful things about what I will call, in my experience, a mindful approach to lovemaking, because it can be spontaneous, because you are meeting with that maybe that same person, you know, every single time. But just like sitting in front of a wall, or doing the dishes, or watching a sunrise, or feeling the breeze against your face, which you've felt a million times, you can find it completely new every single time when we escape from our projections and our minds grasping for something else and never really finding it in next thing, you know. So yeah, I really love that. And I think that's where true spontaneity comes from. You know, spontaneity, I don't think it comes from the conditioned self, the mind. I think spontaneity comes from the more evolved areas of the brain. They call it thinking outside the box, inspiration, you know, enthusiasm, enthusiasm from the divine within. So I think when we do sometimes meet our partner with a freshness and a calmness of mind and an openness to that moment, that's when that spontaneity can start to come through, you know.
And the playfulness and the innocence and the joy, actually.
Yes, beautiful. Let me just check, because I'm aware of the time, and let me just check if there's any questions on my oh, we have Steph loving this. Thank you, Steph. We love you too. And hi, Bethany, and hi, Crystal, watching this. So
someone else has asked how to find the link. So I'm just
so the link should be live on our both of our pages and on the My Soul Sangha page as well.
It's not showing on mine. I'll just
oh, that's strange.
Yours. Just see if I can. Can't see it on yours either.
I have a few people watching, so
yeah,
it
no,
must be there.
I don't know how it all works. So okay.
So yeah, I guess so. I could actually talk to you all day about this. It's so fascinating.
Well, we do.
Yeah, we do when the camera's off. So
yeah.
Is there anything else we haven't covered that you would like to bring into this conversation, or anything else you would like to add?
No, sorry, I was a little bit distracted then around seeing if I can find links and things, but I'll leave that for a moment. So yeah, no, do you have any more questions or anything else you'd like to explore?
I guess I think we've covered all the bases that I feel that I wanted to talk about today, or I was hoping to talk about today. I think that maybe a final summary would be nice, because this is called the end of suffering.
Yeah.
Is there any contemplations or ideas you can have around how to create that? I suppose we've covered quite a lot of this, but anything further on how to create more joy and happiness within lovemaking and within intimacy? Anything you find personally to be useful?
Beautiful. And so first of all, I think if this, to what use the term from your interviews is suffering, is, there's so much that you can do, no matter where you are or what you're feeling. I promise you there's things that can be done. So if anyone's listening to this, I'm always happy if people want to reach out. It may be that it's not about working with me. I'm just happy to share referrals and resources, because I just know how big this first step can be to reach out. But also if you're just, you're feeling you're suffering in this area, it might be that there's a friend you can have a conversation with, or you brave a conversation with your partner, and all these different things. So just there's lots you can do, and go and listen to a podcast, read a book, whatever it is. And then in terms of sort of getting, what was the question around intimacy? Just practices.
Anything people can do to find more joy and happiness.
Find more joy, that's it.
Yeah.
So I feel that one of the key things is a mindset around this. So there's a belief that we should just know what to do. We should just be good at sex. We should just know what our partner wants. And it's not true at all. First of all, if you learn to cook, you learn to cook. If you're good at cooking, you've done that because you've practiced it. You might have read some recipe books or watched some TV shows. And some people are innately just really gifted at cooking, but for most people, they have to go and learn it somehow. And it's exactly the same when it comes to sex. Good lovers, one of my teachers says, good lovers are not born, they learn. They're made through learning. So I think having a big mindset shift that sex isn't just something we naturally do. We have to learn it, and we have to learn about our partners. Again, I use lots of food analogies. So you don't go to a restaurant and choose your partner's dinner. They choose what they feel is going to be good for them today. And again, it's the same when it comes to sex and intimacy. It's about co-creating something together. Or if you're having a solo sex life, creating that for yourself. And so that mindset shift of not just learning, but lifelong learning, because your intimacy may be different after you've had children, or when you're going through menopause, or when you've had a major operation, or all sorts of life things that can happen, so that you have this sense of just reevaluating it, and conversations around what's working well, what would we like to try, what would we like to do less of, more of, and then cultivating time to practice. Because we don't have practice time when it comes to sex. It's like we just should show up in the bedroom, put on the full concert, and it will be amazing and perfect, like you said before. But actually, great intimacy takes practice. It takes communication. And what are you enjoying? Why are you enjoying that? Oh, that's really interesting. And, that dialogue around it. Because I also, when I'm working, for example, with couples, I ask them to sort of debrief their experiences, and, what was it you enjoyed about that experience? Because you learn so much about each other, and when they have these conversations, they're blown away by, oh, I never thought my partner would like that, or think that, or experience that. So if we've got this mindset of sex and intimacy, and relationships as well, we don't have relationship education, and just as we don't have sex education, not only do we not have relationship education, but for many of us, we haven't been raised with good models of relating. Relationships and intimacy have changed so dramatically in the last sort of 50 years compared to the last 500 years. And we're in a whole new place for what's possible. 50 years ago, people didn't have a relationship as a spiritual practice, or for lifelong learning, or saw their partners and them growing together. They did it because they wanted to do it for economic reasons, or having children together, all sorts of different things, where nowadays people's choices around relating is so much more vast. So again, how do we learn about good relating and good communication? You know, I was raised on the EastEnders communication of, you did this to me and it's all your fault, and you know, and actually unpicking all those sort of patterns to come up with healthy relating. And when we are in that learning mode, when we are learners together, when we're letting go of the need to be perfect and know it all, then there's an immediate sort of more happiness that people can experience, because it's like, oh God, I don't need to know it all. And then we're explorers together as well. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, that mindset shift, and what that creates in the relationship, or the intimate dynamic, or whatever, you know, relationship form or whatever it is, that actually really does create more joy and happiness.
Beautiful, thank you. It's kind of what I'm hearing as well. It's like you're kind of creating and finding your own way with it. I know that just to finish, when I entered this arena of spirituality and sexuality, I was reading, I remember Yogananda's book, Paramahansa Yogananda, who I have a lot of time for as a spiritual teacher, and he would talk about his parents who only got together sexually once a year, and that was just to make children, and anything else was almost seen as bad. And so, and then you've got the whole celibacy schools of yoga, and actually that seems, as more information has come to light, that seems to have a massive shadow to it. A lot of teachers who claim to be celibate were definitely not anything but. And then you have, when I entered so I found that, and then I entered into the tantric idea, and a lot of Western tantra maybe, which certainly seems to work for a lot of people, but didn't resonate with me, was that you're less spiritually evolved if you want a monogamous relationship. You just to want to relate with one person. No, you know, then you're attached, and I honor, you know, that there's all these different approaches. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, to bring mine is that you can find your own way in this. You know, what you know, just trust your natural way. Trust, you know, there's so many yoga schools, so many, you know, meditation techniques and approaches. So it's really, for me, I encourage people to really trust and honor their own experience and their own desires as they go into this world, and to work with those, you know.
Yeah, and I'd also just to say on that as well, because, you know, we were talking about this the other day, there's such an explosion in, you know, the world of like, you know, come and sign up this course and be multi-orgasmic and all of these different things as well, and do all these amazing practices, and you know, that's just not for everybody. It's, you know, everything's there possible, but I've had so many people contact me or talk to me saying they feel shame because they just feel so far away from some of that. And it's like, so I would say, be where you're at, and wherever it takes you will just be right for you, in terms of, like you say, find your own way with it. And for some people that might be going to do heaps of workshops and courses. For other people it might be just having a conversation with their partner that opens up a whole new vista for them, you know, and studying and exploring a bit together. Or, you know, I work with so many couples and they've literally never spoken about this, and there've been a heap of misunderstandings, and once they actually have some open and honest conversations, it's huge, the transformation around this. And so there's no, like you say, there's no right way, and there's an infinite ways. And so it's finding your way within that.
Beautiful. And so if anyone wants to get in touch with Sarah further, they can, I guess, do it through your website as well. I'll share a link to the video.
My website, and also my Instagram page. I've got a YouTube channel with some videos, and you know, if you keep either sign up to my newsletter or go onto my Instagram page, in the next sort of 6 weeks, my podcast will be coming out. So I'm going to be having so many, well, I'm already done a lot of the interviews already, just having interviews with just incredible people in the field, and just sharing lots of really practical, informative, inspirational information for people to help them in this area of their lives, well, with sex, relationships and more.
Wonderful. Well, it's been lovely speaking to you, Sarah.
again.
I look forward to doing that in the next 1 minute or two. And thank you for watching, everyone. The recording of this will go onto YouTube as well.
And also, just to say, did we have any questions, or?
Let me check. There wasn't last time I looked.
Okay, but also just to say, if anyone, I'll keep an eye on the thread as well. So if people do have any questions, I'll keep an eye on the next 24 hours, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But also, if people want to reach out privately, I'm also really happy with that as well.
Lovely. One thing that someone has just mentioned, and that we didn't talk about also, but we may talk about another time, is that actually that you can do a lot of very powerful solo practices around that. It's not, we tend to talk about relationship and relating because that's our thing, but actually that you can do a lot of solo practices and some amazing.
Oh my gosh, I mean, 100%. I think we've touched on it at various points, and it's just like, there's so much that can be done. And like I say, with my intimate sexuality model, it's not just for people in relationships, it's for people who aren't at this present time in a relationship, because that level of intimacy and getting to know yourself. And for me, and I've had many years single, and there's so much that you can explore for yourself. And also, sometimes there's just so much that you can explore. So there's some amazing solo practices, and it's a wonderful time to really get to know yourself. Yeah.
And I often say, one of the most potent ways of learning to make love with someone else is actually learning to, as a man, to make love with yourself. Look at your approach to that. And a lot of Mantak Chia, I point to his work. I find his stuff really, really great. His book, I think it's called The Multi-Orgasmic Man, has some incredible practices in there for men. And I'm sure there's plenty of books out there for women as well.
The Multi-Orgasmic Woman's a great book as well. So yeah, both of those. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for everyone who's watching and who will watch it. Thank you so much for having me on your little show.
It's been a pleasure. See you soon.
Likewise. Bye.
Bye-bye.